Well, how Aalborg became change agent was the whole setup that the local community, the regional community supported the setup of the university. And therefore, it was also natural for the university to involve the local regional community in the education so that organizations, institutions, industries, businesses somehow fed ideas into what should the graduates be able to do afterwards, but mainly by students acting, working, solving problems from the local and regional community.
In a certain sense, Aalborg University did not change because even from the very beginning, when Aalborg University was established in 1974, it was to be a problem-based learning university.
In early 80s, professors would be asking about contacts for this or ideas for that, and that students themselves knew about local problems. And whether these local problems was in an industry, and in the 70s, it was about pollution, it was work environment, it was building infrastructure, it was changing our region from being a developing, or you could say a remote region where development was not necessary or interesting or needed by many people living far, far away in Copenhagen.
Because this part of Denmark, the northern Jutland, was at that time an underdeveloped area with higher unemployment rates, lower average incomes, lower educational level, etc., etc. So there were a number of developmental problems that the local lobbying group wanted to solve by getting a university in this town. A directive from the ministry that this was what we were going to do. It was the wish from the local community that this was what we were going to do, because the local community wanted a university that was not a traditional ivory tower, but that was collaborating closely with industry and local society. The problem was that for the Faculty of Engineering and Science, there were already two engineering institutions in town, very traditional, Bachelor of Science institutions. And the government did not want to have three competing engineering institutions within one and the same fairly small town. Aalborg was approximately 150,000 inhabitants at the time. So they said, okay, we will take buildings, equipment, and staff from these two institutions. We'll merge them together, and they will form the core of the Faculty of Engineering and Science in this new problem-based learning university. The process of change as far as staff was concerned was really, really hard in the beginning, because there were a number of teachers who had been teaching in a traditional classroom fashion for 10, 15 years, who all of a sudden had to change to a new approach, and they did not like it at all. Also because there was no preparation. We didn't have any pedagogical courses. Yes, you could have, but they were voluntary. So if you wanted to, you could have pedagogical courses, but if you didn't want to, then you just were not prepared. We spent in the first years of Aalborg University, we spent a lot of time, in a certain sense, fighting internally between the group of people like myself, who immediately took a liking to this PBL concept and thought this was a great concept and a great way of teaching, and then the old and more traditional teachers who absolutely couldn't stand it and didn't want to do it themselves in this system. Also lots of fight on the external fronts, like what I said about the Danish Engineering Association that did not want to admit candidates from Aalborg University. And one of the big industry bosses in Aalborg made headlines in the local newspapers: never ever will an engineer from Aalborg University step over my doorstep.
Through their education, they don't just learn a lot of theory about you can do this, you can do that, you can do so, you can do whatever, but they were otherwise unable to solve real problems, because real problems are problematic, strange, weird, and not out of the book, so that they wouldn't just apply oh, we have a solution here, let's apply that and see, then they have it. Then they can learn from that. But solutions don't necessarily solve problems. They often create new problems instead. So simply having students and university interact, and the more graduates that were employed in the regional, the local community, businesses, industries, organizations, the more contacts came between university and what I would again call the real life and the real problems.
In 1995, when this university was just a little bit more than 20 years old, an agreement was made with another engineering institution approximately 300 kilometers away from here, down in Esbjerg, which is on the west coast of Denmark. And Esbjerg was also an engineering institution graduating bachelors, and they had seen their number of students decreasing rapidly. We had 3 colleagues from Esbjerg who followed like a trainee, so to speak, a colleague here in Aalborg, a civil engineer teacher, an electronics engineering teacher, and a mechanical engineering teacher. At the same time, we had a group of approximately 20 teachers from this institution in Esbjerg who had agreed that they wanted to become part of this new approach. There were more people trained and new people stepped into the first year as the others proceeded on. So that was a much, much better plan and much more gradual process of change. And it was quite successful. The institution in Esbjerg today has seen an enormous increase of students intake, and everybody down there are quite happy about the situation today.
One thing I might add to the scaffolding was simply the project. The way you can say engineers understand a project, but many others also understand a project the same way, that you simply have to analyze and find out what is the problem before you start to be real scientific about solutions. So let's call it two scaffoldings. The project scaffolding and what's the problem scaffolding. The learning gaps will always be there. And whether it is a traditional lecturing environment, there are learning gaps. And for sure, students forget what you tell them. And there are still learning gaps, but the students learn to learn. What is in the curriculum now is not, how do you say it? It's not adequate in 5 years. And it is about being academic, scientific, professional, methodic. And they get it. And that is mainly what we check for during exams.
So I think these 2 studies from Aalborg University change actually quite vividly illustrates what is my main point in terms of change. Don't ever force change upon staff who are not prepared, who are not interested, who are not willing, because nothing good will come out of it. But find the champions who say, wow, this is really interesting. Then let them have some kind of training and then let them get going. And the best thing is to find like a group of champions, 2, 3, 4 people maybe, who can help each other, that they have somebody to discuss with, somebody to spar with when trying to develop ideas, and so on and so forth.